All right, let's get right into it. You've probably felt it, right? That little feeling that something's just a bit off with our economy. You see it in products that are way too cheap to be true, you see it in confusing eco-friendly labels, and you definitely see it in the nonstop headlines about corporate scandals. But what if I told you these aren't just random isolated incidents? No. Today, we're going to unpack the hidden system behind it all, this vicious cycle of eroding ethics that, believe it or not, we're all a part of.
It all starts with a really simple choice, one you've probably made 100 times without even thinking about it. You're shopping, you see a t-shirt for a price that's almost impossible. And a little voice in the back of your head knows that price probably comes at a cost somewhere else. Maybe to a worker, maybe to the environment. But hey, it's so easy, so affordable. That one little decision, cheap t-shirt or clear conscience, that's our doorway into a much, much bigger story. Now, it's so easy to point fingers, isn't it? To blame some greedy CEO over here or a careless shopper over there. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. This isn't about a few bad apples. It's about the barrel itself being broken. We're looking at a systemic problem, a whole web of incentives and pressures that actually rewards the unethical choice just as often as the good one.
So, to really understand these ethical cracks, we've got to look at the most fundamental relationship in any market, the one between the buyer and the seller. Because this is where it all begins, in a feedback loop that has gone completely haywire.
Okay, here's the absolute heart of the matter. Our choices as shoppers don't just happen in a bubble. Every single dollar we spend sends a signal to businesses, and businesses, well, they respond to those signals, which in turn shapes the very choices we have available to us next time. It's a loop, you see, and right now that loop is amplifying the worst in both of us.
To really get our heads around this, there's a fantastic metaphor we can use: the twisted mirror. Imagine the entire marketplace is a giant mirror, where businesses and consumers are just reflecting each other's behaviors. The only problem? The mirror is warped. And that's exactly what the twisted mirror theory is all about. It suggests that when we, as consumers, demand impossibly low prices, businesses reflect that back at us by cutting corners on ethics. And then, when businesses use shady marketing, we reflect that back by getting cynical and trying to find our own unethical loopholes. Each side sees a distorted, kind of ugly version of itself in the other, and the cycle just spirals downwards.
So let's start by looking at one side of that twisted mirror, the businesses. It's tempting to just paint them as the bad guys, but the reality is way more complicated. How do so many companies, even ones that start with the best intentions, end up making such bad choices?
Well, one of the first big reasons is something called agency theory. Now, that sounds super academic, I know, but it's actually really simple. The folks running the company, the managers, often have goals that are totally different from the long-term ethical health of the company. They're chasing this quarter's profits to get their personal bonuses. And right there, you have a massive conflict of interest.
And you see this play out in the real world all the time. To get that fat bonus, a manager might fudge the sales numbers. To hit a quarterly target, they might ignore a safety protocol. Or to save a buck, they might just find a way to shift the blame for pollution onto somebody else. The short-term personal win totally outweighs the long-term ethical damage.
But it's not just about individual greed. There's another huge force at work here called institutional theory. This is basically the corporate version of peer pressure. It's this incredible pressure on companies to just do what everyone else in their industry is doing, even if it's sketchy, just to be seen as the legitimate player. And you can see how this snowballs. First, a company starts mimicking a successful competitor, even their unethical tricks. Then pressure comes from investors to cut costs, no matter what. And finally, the entire industry just kind of adopts this new belief that profit is the only thing that matters, and ethics become a luxury nobody can afford. The entire norm becomes unethical. Okay, now let's flip that twisted mirror around and take a hard look at ourselves. Because we consumers are not just innocent bystanders in all this. We are active players, and our own brains have some pretty sneaky ways of helping us justify those bad bargains. A huge piece of the puzzle is social learning theory. To put it simply, we learn how to act by watching other people. In the marketplace, we see what our friends are buying, we see what influencers are promoting, and we see what just seems normal. And we observe, we imitate, and we internalize those behaviors, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And man, are we learning some questionable lessons these days. Just think about the explosion of these massive, fast fashion hauls on social media, where buying a mountain of cheap clothes is presented as entertainment. Or seeing people online bragging about how they cheat the system with generous return policies. All of this stuff normalizes unethical behavior, and it teaches us that this is just how the game is played.
Now, get ready for this next one, because it's truly fascinating. It's a little psychological quirk we all have called moral licensing. It's this idea that when we do something good, we feel like we've earned moral points. And with those points in our mental bank account, we basically give ourselves a permission slip to do something a little less good later on.
You see this everywhere once you start looking for it. You buy that expensive organic salad for lunch, feeling all virtuous. So later you feel totally fine splurging on that suspiciously cheap shirt. You donate to a charity, so you feel okay about haggling a local artist down to an unfair price. That one good deed literally licenses the bad one, and most of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it.
So, you've got these pressures pushing businesses one way, and you've got these psychological tricks pushing consumers the same way. Now, let's put it all together and see how they lock into place in that twisted mirror, creating a cycle with very, very real consequences.
This right here is the twisted mirror in action. Look at this. On one side, we consumers are demanding the absolute lowest price possible. And the mirror reflects that right back. Businesses have no choice but to slash labor and material costs. We prioritize convenience over everything, so they reflect that with tons of wasteful, single-use products. We chase these fleeting, unsustainable trends, and they reflect that by greenwashing, slapping a fake eco-label on something to get a sale. It is a perfect and perfectly damaging reflection.
And here's the bottom line. This isn't just a thought experiment. This is not some abstract theory from a textbook. This self-perpetuating cycle of distorted reflections is actively, tangibly harming our world.
And here's just a sample of the bill that's coming due. Our trust in the whole economic system gets eroded. We're left with permanent environmental scars from all the pollution and waste. The constant demand for cheap stuff deepens social injustices through exploited labor. And, ironically, it even hurts the economy because the legitimate, ethical businesses just can't compete. In the long run, this cycle hurts everybody.
Which brings us right back to that mirror. The systems and theories are huge, yes, but they are built from billions of tiny individual choices, our choices. So the final question isn't about them, it's about us. The next time you step into the marketplace, with all its pressures and temptations, what does your reflection look like? And what's it going to take for all of us to start seeing something better?